Greetings Guardians, my name is Bife here. So this video is one of three. If some of this lore ends up being particularly pertinent, I'm going to reference it in other videos, but it's all going to be split into three things because that's how the Collector's Edition lore from Lightfall comes. Split in 3 books, 3 different characters, talking about 3 different things. Whilst we do have the lore from both the perspective of Eris and also from Keitel and the extra documents that they hold containing information on Elsie Bray and Calus, we are going to first be looking at Ikora and Ophikius's investigation of Osiris. This is one of those 3 lore books, and it's got a lot of stuff to it, but we're going to cover it all today. I'm going to hopefully cover the other 2 just ahead of Lightfall. However, there are other videos out there on these topics, so I wanted to go ahead and prime you for that. It's going to take me a little bit of time to actually get to the others, and in the meantime, both Mylin and Yves have good Collector's Edition lore videos, so if you've not already done so, go ahead and share the love and jump in, watch some of their content too. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into this book. First of all, before you jump into any of the books, you have a note from Zavala attached to all of them, and it reads as follows. Guardian. Fragments of information regarding Neptune have been discovered recently that could become of interest to the Witness and its disciple Calus. Our planetary scans have been inconclusive so far, but should you become involved, I want to keep you informed. Osiris has intel, though it may not be fully reliable given his imprisonment by Savathun. Ikora's personal assessment of him has been provided for your eyes only. Eris believes the Exo-Stranger's pet may have come from Neptune. Documentation regarding this creature therefore may bear relevance. Finally, supplementary records from Empress Keitel provide insight into Calus's psyche. Perhaps a weakness can be found and exploited. Good luck, Zavala. Needless to say, this book about Osiris spends a little bit of an interesting time as far as context in the story is concerned. This is after Osiris has spent a long time on the bench and has only really been back with us for a single season, and it also means that we're going to be looking at a lot of stuff to do with trust. This is something we've talked about before, but a lot of the questions that Ophikius and Ikora are asking are all about trust. For those of you who don't know, Ophikius is Ikora's ghost, and he is one that is accompanying Ikora's notes on the investigation and rereading them and checking them in with her after every single one of the debriefings that she did with Osiris. Also, as a side note, I realize I keep saying Ophikius wrong throughout this entire thing. I'm gonna chalk that up to being ill, so sorry. Continue. This lore book starts with an exchange between the Guardian and her ghost, and it starts with Ophikius reminding Ikora not to blame herself for Savathun's trickery, which fooled key members of the tower. She's not interested in being given a free pass and states that she will need to impartially assess Osiris without any leniency before he can be sent back into the field. It's also noted that this is not likely to happen again given his lack of a ghost. On the subject of Sagira, it's made clear that Ophikius and Ikora contemplated bringing her shell to the relic on Mars to see if she could somehow be reforged. But they chose not to, considering that it was unlikely to work. This is especially true given that the relic is made of darkness, and Sagira is forged in light. Osiris's first debriefing is in itself fairly awkward but uneventful. Osiris tells Ikora when he believes he was taken over by Savathun on the moon, and he acknowledges that a lot of the social capital he used to have in the Last City has all but evaporated thanks to the past events. I think the biggest thing about it is that Osiris asks Ikora if she trusts him. She states that whilst she trusts Osiris, she doesn't necessarily trust her own perceptions anymore, the incident with Savathun clearly having tampered with her quite substantially. To this, Osiris replies with approval, and the first of 4 debriefings is over. In the second debriefing, Ikora returns something precious to Osiris. His ghost's shell. Sagira's remains were recovered by our efforts in the Throne World, and initially they were sent to the Hidden, and further investigations were conducted upon them. This required them to be used multiple times within the Altars of Reflection. It was discovered by the hidden agent Lisbon 13 that placing various objects within the Altar of Reflection could create further opportunities for insight. This knowledge came at a great cost, considering that Lisbon would have to revisit various uncomfortable details about his past work as a part of the Kentok 3. Osiris's grief when receiving Sagira's shell was obvious, and Ikora wondered how again she could have allowed herself to be tricked. The conversation shifts in this second debriefing to Imaru, Savathun's ghost. It's here that we start to get a little more insight into the way that ghosts resurrect guardians, and the conditions under which this normally happens. In most instances, a body is required for a ghost to resurrect their guardian, but in the case of complete disintegration, a ghost is capable of resurrecting their guardian from nothing. Therefore, Savathun's body was stolen out of her throne world by the Hidden, and they scoured the place where Savathun died for any genetic material that they might be able to find. All of this to ensure that they were the only ones that had Savathun's body. This was all done to hopefully prevent her resurrection, and the body has even been of good use to Eris Morn, who has dissected it and obtained various different secrets from its remains. Osiris points out to Ikora that because Imaru is a hive ghost, Imaru might have some other means of resurrecting Savathun that is unique to the hive. Not allowing him to know exactly about Finch, Ikora lets Osiris know that they have a source on the inside that can confirm that this is not the case. After this second debriefing, Ikora and Ophiuchus note the odd nature of Osiris's concern with Savathun's ability to resurrect. Ophiuchus describes it as a quiet kind of fear. In the third debriefing, we're reading into some really interesting things as we start talking about the underworld and mythology. In the context notes, Ikora states that there was one part of the conversation where Osiris didn't seem entirely himself. All of this is wrapped up in mythological stories of people who ventured into the underworld and returned. I actually want to read a part of this in full because it's quite relevant in my opinion. Take a listen to this. Osiris. Debating the reasons does not interest me. The data does. We have thought Neptune to be a dead end. A hope that was never realized. But she knew something about it, or perhaps something on it, which brought her power. Some deception or hidden truth, some bluff that she had held uncalled against the witness and its disciples. Though my senses were darkened, that much was clear through the murk of her throne world. There was a secret she kept veiled, even to the last. I do not fully understand what I saw, and for a human to understand a hive mind. How many legends of Catabases do we have, Ikora? Ikora. We currently have dozens of stories about descending into the realms of the dead, though research has indicated many more must have existed, lost in layers of human history we will never lay eyes on. Mathematically, there were likely hundreds. Inanna and Dumazid and Geshtinanna, Orpheus and Eurydice, Izanagi and Izanami, to name a few. Gods and goddesses, mortal and immortal lovers, always seeking to descend and return with the lost. Osiris. And neither the lost nor those who searched for them were ever returned the same. Ikora. Is that how you think of yourself? Osiris. Do I sound that dire? All guardians, all light bearers have done as much, but others, well, I wonder, do our former enemies have similar stories? Ikora. What exactly are you getting at? Osiris. Frequently, the underworld or those realms beyond mortal existence possess wisdom the living do not. What then is knowledge from a dead hive god vested in deception? Ikora. So, Neptune and secrets. Osiris. Inanna. Ikora. What is it? Osiris. A thought. An echo of one. The return from the underworld, and Inanna cast off her veil. It makes sense. I did not understand. When I first felt clutching whispers carrying wisdom away from Kerr, when she strode into the sunlight again. Osiris murmurs, self-directed, see initial notes. Osiris, focusing, clears throat. Ikora, this witness. I do not say this lightly, but it made her wary. Not in the way that she might have been of Guardians, who storm blazing into battle with power and conviction and no restraints. I still feel it. Her concern, though I can give you no proof. And concern is exactly the type of thing she would lay contingency plans for. Ikora, I understand. This conversation is one that raises alarm bells for Ikora and Ophiuchus. They get the notion here that Osiris was close enough to Savathun to have glimpsed her thoughts and emotions, and they assume therefore that Savathun was close enough to have had them planted. Ikora and her ghost then consider that Neptune may well be just another trap laid by Savathun. However, the fact that the Witch Queen feared the witness in itself is another indication of just how formidable this foe might be, and this is what gives both Ikora and Ophiuchus pause. The third debriefing also touches on a very important note thematically. Namely, it's all about the Inanna reference and the idea of mythologies that chart a person's journey into the underworld and back out. In particular, Inanna is a name that comes from a goddess in Sumerian mythology, which is naturally very much interlinked with Mesopotamian mythology. I know that sounds like a silly sentence you hear someone say in some kind of documentary on the History Channel, but seriously, the Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology are two cultures that blend together because Sumeria ultimately is a part of the larger Mesopotamian culture. Sumerian culture came first, and as a result it has a lot of overlapping deities. Most crucially in this instance though, Inanna is an overlapping deity with another goddess that we know in Mesopotamian culture. Whilst crucially Inanna is a goddess of fertility, sexuality, and paradoxically, war, she is known by another name in Mesopotamian culture, Ishtar. Yeah, Destiny fans, you have a reference there, and I know you recognize it. More notably than this is the fact that Ishtar is a name that comes up in Destiny in the form of the Ishtar Collective. Ishtar is something that has been noticed before. This is something that we find on Venus, and Venus is actually the associated god with it if you were to transpose things onto the Roman pantheon. All of this is to say that the Ishtar Collective is a real thing that might be getting referenced here, and that might seem odd and nonsensical to most, but it's not so nonsensical when you look at the vidoc that Bungie published, and in the Welcome to Neomuna section, you see a door of a research outpost, and guess what's plastered around it? Yeah, Ishtar Collective logos on the wall. And this is in Neomuna. Take a look, you can actually see it in this section here, just before they talk about the Lost Sectors.
Neomuna is that it's like this big neon-soaked city, but it has quite a spectrum of different environments.
I think my favorite.
I have no idea why these are here. Assuming Neomuna was established by Soteria, and the colony was something which was simply created by the singular AI that saved the human beings in smile pods, then you're looking at something remarkable because, well, Soteria would have no way of having the Ishtar Collective established safely, given that it's a Golden Age or post-Golden Age colony that would have had no contact with them. Unless the Vex are involved, because there are some 200 plus copies of a few Ishtar researchers that have been uploaded into the Vex network. So I feel like that might be the reason why all of this is going to be part of a story that plays out. Maybe all those personalities have something going on here in the first place. There are some interesting ideas laid in there about characters returning from the underworld and certain key elements of crazy deep lore. There is definitely a Maya Sundaresh-shaped direction, but the theory I have is something I want to sit on and allow to brew for just a little longer. Either way, with all this theory, we are getting ahead of ourselves. The fourth and final debriefing does not go smoothly. Ikora notes that it is not one of her finest moments. Ikora asks how Osiris and Saint are doing. Whilst it seems as though Osiris is non-committal with his first answer, saying that they are fine, He brings up how glad he is to be back with Saint and that his was the first face that he saw. Ikora states that that's good, considering how distant he was when he was possessed by Savathun. This is clearly an incredibly painful topic for Osiris, on account of how he sometimes tried to call out to Saint while he was possessed, but was never able to reach him because of Savathun's influence. The pain of having put his partner through such an ordeal clearly still haunts him. If you push away the one you love and they still stay, that's commendable to them, but in Savathun's instances it's a wound that haunts him deeply, even if he wasn't the one to have technically done it. Ikora's next attempts to console him land on deaf ears, and Osiris remarks openly that he feels useless, and for once in his life, he feels his age in a way that he never did as a guardian. He also pries out of Ikora a note that she's not necessarily sending agents to Neptune yet, due to a lack of resources. Osiris can see what this really means, which is that he's not trustworthy yet. This is something that gives us an interesting timeline point for all of this, because if this is the case, then I think it's clear to say that this is before we actually enter the Spire of the Watcher dungeon, and it's well before the end of the Season of the Seraph, where we get more information to do with Osiris, Neptune, and the information that Rasputin had on the colony there. By this point in time, Ophiuchus had changed his mind and saw the lack of telemetry from Neptune as suspicious, implying that he was leaning towards recommending scouts. He also pointed out more about Osiris's Inanna reference from the third debriefing, and how Inanna never truly left the underworld in her famous mythological story, an odd detail to bring up for sure, but one that is potentially of relevance. The final conclusion of Ikora's investigation is that she does believe she is talking to the real Osiris, trauma and all, but that she cannot confirm that he is truly free of Savathun's influences. Whilst he may never be cleared for field duties again, it is clear that his knowledge represents a resource that the tower can ill afford to lose, so him being grounded seems justified for the moment, though it may not remain this way forever, given that he will be joining us on Neptune come Lightfall. But that's all from me for now. We'll be going through the other two lore books as time goes on. I imagine that Destiny is going to drop a launch trailer at some point soon, so we'll take a break in the day for that. We also have more T-Slape and a few other bits and pieces to do, but for the moment this is where our content lands. As some of you can probably hear, I'm sick. I got the Rona, unfortunately. We tried so long to stay away from it, did an entire convention without getting it, did all the precautions, and now I guess my number is up 3 years earlier. So if things get really bad, content will slow down, but hopefully all this will pass in time for Lightfall. All that being said though, thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, go ahead and leave a like, and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. Of course, as always, you can leave your commentary down below in the comments section if you have any thoughts of your own. But in the meantime, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me, and that my name is Bife. Porodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.